What's up guys? Happy Thursday. We are back in the fab area working on the car again, and this video we are going to be getting the turbo diff and the full turbo drivetrain into the car so that it's fully connected, the wheels to the motor, all said and done. The other thing we're going to do in this video is get the whole fuel system done, since we're going to have the subframe out and the fuel tank out to do the undercoating on the back of the car. Fuel tank's already going to be out, so we're going to get the fueling done in this video. We're going to get the turbo drivetrain in the car in this video. I'm super stoked, guys. Let's get started. Let's get this thing raised and start pulling stuff out so that we can get the rear end done and then get jumping on that fuel system. Luckily, the FC chassis is actually pretty easy to get unbolted. All I'm going to have to do is pull the caliper off, and then I can unbolt the coilover at the bottom here. Then we have our subframe link here, so we just unbolt it there, and then we've got a couple bolts up in this front area on both sides, and then the whole thing comes out. So we're gonna get that popped out real quick, get it out of the way, and then we can also get the fuel tank out while we're there so that everything is out from under the car and we can start working on stuff. I'm actually very excited to finally be having this happen. I have had to go through so many transmissions, so many drive shafts, so many diffs in this car, just really beating on it on the track and whatnot. The non-turbo drivetrains are not the strongest thing in the world, so it's cool to finally be putting this turbo setup in the car where, like, I know that it's going to be able to take a good amount of power. I know that it's a strong drivetrain, and it's, you know, it's been sitting around forever. I've had this drivetrain waiting to go in this car for so long, and it feels so good to finally have it going in the car. And we got the rear end out with the NA differential and NA axle, so we're gonna get both of those swapped out. I got the Turbo 2 diff pulled out so we can clean it up. We got to pop it open, figure out how we're going to lock it, if we're going to shim it or if we're going to weld it. And then I want to swap over my poly bushings from this guy over to that guy. But before we do that, we're going to get the fuel tank out of this guy real quick. So I actually thought for a while on whether or not I wanted to do the stock fuel tank with a surge tank or go to a fuel cell on this car. With the fact that it's going to go back to being a street car at some point, I decided that it'd be best just to keep the stock fuel tank and then put the surge tank in as a precautionary kind of thought, so that I knew that I wasn't going to deal with any sort of like fuel starvation or anything like that on it. I think this is a good move, but obviously we'll see once we get the car started. The fuel tank is out of the car, so everything in the rear end is now out of the car completely. We also got all of the old fuel lines out of the car. So the reason the fuel lines are coming out of the car is that the Turbo 13V is going to be pulling a bunch more fuel than what those hard lines are capable of. So I'm going to be switching the car over to 8 AN feed and 6 AN return lines. So we'll be having to run AN lines down the car, which makes the hard lines obsolete. So we took those off. We also got the fuel tank out of the car into the work area. So what we're going to have to do here is actually convert this guy over to 8 AN and 6 AN for the feed and return, so that it will be able to connect to the surge tank. The other perk is that'll give it more volume flow, and going to bigger fuel lines all the way from the top hat creates less back pressure on the lift pump. So how a lift pump surge tank setup works is you have your lift fuel pump and then you have your pressure pumps in the surge tank. The fuel pump does not need to flow that much fuel because technically the lift pump coming out of the fuel tank is zero pressure. Normally, fuel pumps are rated at about 40, 50, 60 PSI. So with having zero pressure, it technically moves more fuel. That will guarantee that the fuel pump has as little pressure from the fuel tank to the surge tank as possible, guaranteeing that our 255 lift pump is definitely going to be enough to then fill the surge tank and then run up to the car. But with all that being said, it's time to jump back on the rear end. We got to get all the NA stuff out of the rear end, and then we got to get started on getting this guy cleaned up. We're gonna do some quick pressure washing on the turbo diff. I got it sprayed down with some degreaser. We got the pressure washer out. I think this guy's about as clean as it's gonna get. What I'm thinking is when I get it torn apart to lock it, I'm gonna pull everything off the casings, or at least mask off the casings. And then I'm gonna get this thing just quick sprayed because it looks pretty rough right now. We at least got pretty much we got all the rust off of it, as much of this patching as we could off. So then I'm gonna respray that while the diff's out, but I'm gonna let it dry for a little bit and then we can go ahead and tear it apart and get the pumpkin out of the housings and get the housings masked off to be sprayed. And well, there she is. This is the Turbo 2 diff. It's pretty, I would say, gunky in there, but there's not any abnormal wear from what I can see, so that's good. So I think at this point, it's time to get this thing torn down to see what we can do to lock it up. This should be a clutch type differential. It is an S4 turbo, so S4 turbos were a clutch type, which means I might, or at least I should be able to shim this in order to lock it up. And that would be a less permanent version. I just gotta I'm debating on whether or not shimming it's gonna be enough for drifting, or if I should just lock it by laying some welds on it and calling it a day. Well, the diff is apart, and I wanted to show you guys, so this is kind of the thought of what's going to be going on. So we have these spring plates basically, and what we're going to do is make a shim that is the thickness of this, that is basically this inner circle and this outer circle, that will actually shim these so they sit down harder against the slip clutches inside. So we're gonna make up some shims. I have some different thicknesses of shimming. It's essentially like a sheet of metal that's different thicknesses for shimming. So I'm gonna cut some shims out and then we will put this thing back together. All right guys, we have 2 shims cut out and ready to go. As you can see, the whole point of the shim is that it sits right over top of that clutch plate. You can see it's a nice even match to the clutch plate. So basically these guys are going to go one on each side and they will act as shims to compress the clutch packs more, to hopefully cause either very close to or a full locking ratio. So now we're going to get this whole assembly packed back together and see what it does and what it looks like, and make sure that everything seems to work correctly. That's the hope, at least. And hopefully be able to compress this whole thing down in the press and get everything bolted in and locked down. So we got the diff put back together. I popped the yokes in so that you guys could see. If I try and twist this thing now, it is absolutely locked up. I'm actually quite intrigued now, so I'm gonna see if I can get it to twist at all, which the thought is that I can't. Oh yeah, even with using a 3-foot and a 2-foot bar, still not moving. So with the diff being done, the next step here is I'm going to get the bushings pressed out of the Turbo 2 diff and put the poly bushings from the NA diff onto the Turbo 2 rear housing, and then I'm going to do a little bit more painting and refurbishing. We have the housing from the diff and then the front housing for the Turbo 2 diff are both looking a little rough, so we're going to do a quick respray on those, and then we are going to shoot the undercoating on the back part of the car. So in last video we undercoated from the rear subframe forward, and now that the rear subframe and the gas tank are out, I'm going to do a quick spray down on the back of the car, so the whole bottom of the car is undercoated. Well, we've got the rear housing and the front housing for the diff both masked off and ready to spray. So we are going to get these guys sprayed real quick so they can start drying on the primer, and then I'm going to jump on over to the back car. We'll get that sprayed off with the pressure washer, do some undercoating. I'm sure you guys can tell I do love repainting stuff when it's out. To me, it's one of those deals where if you already have it pulled out to work on it and it doesn't look great, you may as well go back and refurbish it or clean it up or whatever. I think when you get the final install done, it just gives you a little bit more appreciation for the effort you put into it, and it makes everything come out so much better once it's done. I think it's totally worth it. All right, our day of painting is done. We've got the front diff mount all sprayed and drying. Our rear cover is silver again like it was factory. Our front side diff housing is all nice and black like it was factory. And we've got the whole undercarriage back here all undercoated, including our wheel wells. So what that means is I'm done for today. I'm going to let all of this stuff dry, and then tomorrow it all should be hard enough that we can go ahead and put the diff pieces back together and get the diff back in the rear end and the rear end back in the car. So I'm gonna let everything dry, and then tomorrow we're getting all this stuff put back together. Aha, there we go. So that is our refurbished Turbo 2 diff set into the FC subframe. I did end up setting the backlash and the gear meshing on the diff, so that is all set. And then it's RTV'd, there's no fluid yet in it. I will go ahead and throw fluid in it once the subframe is back in the car so I know that it's level, but check that out. I ended up going with the factory colors. I felt like it would just look nice and clean. There it is from the back. It actually pops a lot from the back when you see that silver, but I think it looks good. I think it came out good enough. We also got our solid front diff mount on there. Now all I've got to do is get the turbo axles in on both sides, and then the whole subframe is going back in the car. So I actually found these Turbo 2 axles on Amazon. They were pretty cheap, so I'm intrigued to see if they actually last. I'm gonna play guinea pig to see if they work, but if anyone's interested, I will throw a link to them if they're still available in the description, so you can give them a shot if you want to. They came as fully built axles, and they look like they're either refurbished or brand new, so I don't know. I guess we'll see how they work and go from there. I'm not totally sure. So this is our Turbo 2 drive shaft. This is one from Mazzatrix. That is one of their ones they just stock. We're gonna get the drive shaft in the car so our whole turbo drivetrain is connected, and then we're gonna jump onto the fueling system and get everything plumbed and ready so that this thing can get fuel, so we can jump on getting the wiring done and then get everything we need finished up to get the motor started. So our last project here is to get the diff and the transmission full of fluid. So we're gonna go ahead and crack the diff drain bolts and get the diff fluid filled, and then we'll get the trans filled. Well, now we just sit here and pump for a really long time. I really need to get a different transfer pump for doing gear oil. These things are great for thinner fluids, but when it comes to the heavy gear oil, these Harbor Freight pumps just have a hard time, and I tend to blow off the tube after the pump and then spray gear oil all over the place, which is never fun and always smells terrible. Yeah, I do not like using these things for gear oil. Now that the diff is full, it's time to throw some fluid in the trans. Luckily, the trans is getting the new squeezy bottles. I don't know how new, but the squeezy bottles from Valvoline. The reason that I put some just generic gear oil in the back is once the car's running, I'm gonna do like 100 miles of just kind of test driving on the car, and then I'm actually gonna drain the gear oil again because there was a little gunky inside of there and I wasn't able to get everything out of the diff. So I threw just some cheap stuff in there so that I could kind of run everything through, and then I'll re-drain that to get the rest of the gunky stuff out, and then we'll put some better gear oil in the diff. Gonna throw some thread sealant on our drain plug and get that thing sealed up. The diff and trans are full of fluid and ready to go for the first start. So now we got all of our fuel stuff. We've got fuel lines, fuel pumps, other fuel related systems. We've got the tank out of the car, and what we're gonna do is get this top hat converted over so that it's good for AN, and then we are going to get all of the fuel stuff figured out. We've got our surge tank, like I said, pumps, lines, adapters. I'm pretty sure I don't have everything that I need to actually get the system fully done, but I can at least get everything ran, routed, and figure out what I need so that I can order the stuff that I don't have. We've got our fuel assembly here. So we're gonna get all of this kind of torn down and see what kind of inlet outlet stuff we can come up with. Well, as you can see, I've been doing a little bit of stuff on the surge tank. I've also been getting the top hat of the fuel tank prepped for AN. I realized doing this, I'm gonna change the routing of some stuff. So with that, I have to order some different parts. So to keep the ball rolling as far as the fuel system, we are gonna jump over to the front side of the car, which means it's time to get all of our fittings out, our fuel lines out, our regulator, and we're gonna start running lines. So my goal with this is gonna be to get everything coming from the back of the car up done. We're gonna start off by getting our fuel rails and fuel injectors set up to put them in the car. I would like to say shout out to the boys at Full Function for getting me set up. They helped me plan out what injectors to do for this build, and they also got me set up with the INJECTORDYNAMICS injectors and their fuel rail set. So we're gonna get all of our injectors onto these rails, get everything prepped, and then we're gonna get in the car. So I've already got the adapter posts on this guy, so we just gotta throw our injectors on. Start with the lower, which is our primary. We wanna grease our O-rings to make sure that they sit in nicely. So now we're getting rib nuts in and the bracket in for our fuel filter. Since I'm running the INJECTORDYNAMICS injectors, they do call for a very low micron filter. I'm going to be running the INJECTORDYNAMICS F750i. It is, from what I saw, I think 5 or 7 microns, which is a very, very fine filter, but it's what they call for to make sure that your injectors last and are taken care of and don't have any oversized particles to cause any issues. So that's what I went with. That's what they called for. I think your normal, like kind of cheaper ones are like either like 50 or 100 microns, so definitely make sure that you get this guy. Since we are running PTFE fuel lines, so we can run E85, it does take a little bit more time because you have little ferrules that you have to slip between the Teflon tubing and the outer braid, but totally worth it. I did also 3D print some jaws for my vise that have the shape of the AN fittings to hold them. They are essentially like soft vise pieces, so definitely another thing worth it just to make working on your PTF lines easier. We're then gonna go ahead and throw this guy down into the engine bay and figure out our lengths and stuff to finish our first fitting. And again, just going through, putting the ferrule on, tighten everything down, make sure it's all good. Try not to scratch anything if possible. And then it's kind of just a rinse and repeat process. This is another shot of me marking it. Basically, I tape it-ish where it's gonna be, and then I use a Sharpie to mark exactly where I want my cut to be. It just makes it a lot cleaner and it's a lot more precise, and you can really dial in exactly where you want your cut to be when you go ahead and throw it through the saw to chop it. So just my little 2 cents on the best way to cut that and the best way to mark your lengths so that you get a nice clean cut on your AN hose. And then, like I said, we are gonna cut it. I like to use a bandsaw. It creates a cleaner cut. It doesn't melt the PTF tube inside, and it also keeps a lot less debris from going in your hose. You're still gonna have to spray it out and verify that it's clean, but the saw definitely makes it a lot better for actually cutting it. You can see here, slipping the ferrule on, that's part of the PTF system. And it's just kind of a rinse and repeat process. You kind of get in the groove of it once you kind of figure out how you want to mark stuff, how you want to cut it, and all that. Very first FC fuel system PTFE hose done. Very excited. So I've done everything I can do in the engine bay for now. I am waiting on some fittings to continue and finish the front half of the car. I'm also waiting on fittings for the fuel tank. So I'm going to switch over to trying to get the surge tank in the car. The FCs have the spare tire pocket right here. My thought is that I'm gonna try and get this guy sat down inside of the spare tire well. So I need to make a little plate carrier that will mount into that spare tire area and then mount to the surge tank. So we're gonna see what we can come up with down here and then get the surge tank set up, get it mounted in there, and then I can at least get the return line from the fuel pressure regulator across the bottom of the car and to the surge tank, get that done. So I at least have everything that I can do tonight done, and that'll make me feel a little bit better and a little bit more ready for busting out the rest of the fuel system tomorrow. Well, that is the thought. I think it should work. I think I'm gonna call it there for the night, and then I will pick up tomorrow starting to do the fuel system from the surge tank up to the front of the car. We will have the rest of the fittings so that we can do the rest of the fueling and get the whole fuel system done and ready to go for first start. With getting the surge tank in the car last night and getting it temporarily mounted, that is gonna be where it ends up staying as far as location wise. So with it being mocked up in that spot, I can do some more fueling. There's a chance that there might be some rain, so I'm kind of in a battle with the weather, but as long as the weather holds off, I should be able to get some of the fuel lines done, and then the rest of the fittings are coming in later today so that we can finish the fuel system. With that being mounted, I'm going to get the return line from the pressure regulator back to the surge tank and then start figuring out the surge tank lines here. I should be able to get the pressure lines that go from the dual fuel pumps out to the front of the car done today. So we're gonna hop into getting the fueling lines done today, and that is as long as the weather holds off. So now we're running our 6AN return line from the front of the car to the back. I'm very excited for this because once this whole fuel system is done, we know that it can support around 600 horsepower, and we could upgrade pumps and injectors to go more, but the actual fuel system itself in terms of the lines and the surge tank and everything like that will be capable of even more. So when we go ahead and put the turbo setup into the purple car for a competitive build, we are going to be able to bump up the power if need be to stay in whatever kind of competitive horsepower range we need. One of the things I have to do on the back side of the car is this, and that is also because I'm running 2 fuel pumps. So in order to get those 2 fuel pumps into a single 8AN line going to the front of the car, this is the setup we have. So this is coming off of the surge tank. Each one of these AN fittings will be coming off of one pump. So these are pump 1, pump 2 we'll call it, and then they go into this Y, and then the Y converts it over to a single 8AN, which then goes from the front of the car, or from the back of the car to the front of the car. So now we're gonna do this little pigtail, we'll call it, fuel system pigtail, to connect the dual fuel pumps into a single fuel pump. We're gonna jump on that real quick, get those set up, get it locked into the surge tank, and then we can kind of move on from there. I think once that guy's done, the next step is going to be running the single 8AN from this Y harness up to the fuel filter. And now we are finally able to put our 8AN fuel pressure line in. So we have our return done. We need some fuel to go to the rails to hit that return. So we are putting our 8AN, getting it routed. And then I did have to do all of the AN fitting stuff as far as the ferrule and stuff in the back of the car. Kind of screwed up on my plan, and the 8AN didn't fit through the passages, so we had to make it work. Haha! This is the last hose that needs to be run to technically connect our whole entire, possibly 600 horsepower capable fuel system for my RX7. With that, all of the fuel lines on my FC RX7 turbo project are done. So I think in next video, I'm gonna shoot to get the fuel system done, and then we are going to switch over to getting the radiator and possibly the intercooler mounted, and getting all the rest of the front end fabrication done, including getting the oil coolers mounted on the car. And then I think after that, we are on the home stretch to doing wiring and then firing the car up, and then finally getting it aligned and tuned. So next video, keep an eye out for it. We're gonna get the fuel system finished. We're for sure gonna get the cooling system finished. I'm gonna shoot for getting the intercooler mounted and possibly start getting the turbo piping done. And then we're gonna get the front end fabrication done. And then depending on how that goes, either in that video or the next video, we're gonna start working on fabricating the turbo manifold, get the turbo mounted, and get our exhaust built, followed by getting all of the electrical done on the car, and then getting the car started. Keep an eye out. I really appreciate you guys watching. If you liked the video, go ahead and hit the thumbs up. If you saw anything of concern or you had any questions about something that I did, feel free to drop a comment. We can talk about it. If you're liking the build series so far and want to keep following it, definitely hit the subscribe button so you can keep following the content and get notified every time I post. And if you guys want to support the channel, support the build, definitely jump on over to my Etsy site, pick up some merch. It's really appreciated. It keeps this build going, gets us one step closer to seeing if this thing will actually run, seeing how much power it makes, and seeing how well it drifts. I really appreciate you guys watching. Until next time, peace.